We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Amud Aleph in Meseches Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 50a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the Machlokas Tanoim in the Mishnah in terms of the death penalties of Bezin, which are more strict. And the Rabbanan hold again that the order is Skila, Sreifa, Hereg, V'chenek. And the Gemara now explains why it is that Skila is considered more Chomer than Sreifa. Because Kasabri Rabbanan, because the Rabbanan hold Nesua Yotza L'Sreifa V'lo Arusa, that when it comes to a Nesua, this is talking a Bas Kohen, the daughter of a Kohen who commits adultery. If she committed that adultery and she was a Nesua, she was married, so then she gets Sreifa. That's different than the typical punishment, which is a punishment of Chenek. But V'lo Arusa, that's not true by a Bas Kohen who's an Arusa. Now a Bas Yisrael who's an Arusa gets Skila, and a Bas Kohen who's an Arusa also gets Skila, does not get Sreifa. And so therefore, from the fact that the Arusa, which is considered more strict, the reason why the Arusa is considered to be more strict, the woman that's betrothed, is because she's still in the house of her father, and so therefore she more profanes her father's house, so to speak. But in any case, the point is, from the fact that the Torah says that an Arusa gets Skila, Shma Minah, Skila Chamura, so you see that really Skila is more Chamur, it is stricter than Sreifa. Again, the Nesua Bas Kohen, she's going to get Sreifa, she is treated more strictly than a Nesua Bas Yisrael, but when it comes to an Arusa Bas Kohen, she gets Skila, that shows that Skila is more Chamur than Sreifa. And the Gemara continues, Skila Chamura Misayif, Skila stoning is more Chamur than Sayif, which is beheading, Shekein Nitno Lemegadif Ula Ovid Avodas Kochavim, like we said, someone who curses HaKadosh Baruch Hu, somebody who serves Avodah Zarah, is going to get Skila, that shows that it's stricter. And the Gemara says, Umay Chumra Kedaron, what's the strictness, just like we said, but the Gemara says, Adrab, on the contrary, Sayif Chamur, we can argue that maybe Sayif is actually stricter, Shekein Nitin La'anshe Ir Hanidachas, because that's the punishment given to the people of an Ir Hanidachas, which is a city where people were led astray to worship Avodah Zarah, so maybe we see Sayif is more Chamur. Umay Chumra, why would we say that that's more Chamur? Shekein Mamon and Avad, because we also find that their money, their property is destroyed. So that shows that we're treating them in a very strict fashion. But the Gemara says, Amrit, we have to say as follows. Eza koach meruba, which one is stronger? Koach hamediach, the person who incites, who causes others to serve Avodah Zarah, or koach hanidach, or the person who is convinced, like the people of Nir Hanidachas who are convinced to serve Avodah Zarah. Haveyomer koach hamediach, obviously the mediach is going to be considered stronger. We're going to treat that more harshly. Betanya, and we learned in the Brisa, madiche Ir Hanidachas, those who cause the people in the city to worship Avodah Zarah. The madiche Ir Hanidachas, beskila, they actually get skila. So therefore we see again that skila is the stricter punishment. And the Gemara continues, skila chamur michenek, skila is also stricter than chenek, than strangulation. Again, shekei nitin lemegadef ulovid avodas kochavim, that's the punishment for one who blasphemes, who curses HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and also for one who worships Avodah Zarah. And the Gemara continues, Umay Chumran, why is that so strict? Kedarman, like we said above. Again, those are people who deny the fundamentals of the Torah. But the Gemara says, Adrab, on the contrary, Chenek Chomer, one can argue that strangulation is stricter. Shekei Nitan Lamake Aviv Imo, because that's the punishment for somebody who strikes his father or his mother. Umay Chumran, why is that considered more strict? Shekein Hukash Kevodon, L'chavad HaMakom, because their honor, honoring one's parents, is compared to honoring HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So maybe that's the one that's actually stricter. And the Gemara continues, Mida Afke Rachmana La'arusa Bas Yisrael Michlal Nesua Bas Yisrael. Well, from the fact that when it comes to an Arusa Bas Yisrael, the Torah says that's treated differently than a Nesua Bas Yisrael, and again, an Arusa who commits adultery, that's considered stricter. And what do we see by the Arusa Bas Yisrael? Michenek l'skila, that instead of getting chenek, the Arusa Bas Yisrael gets skila, like we said above. Again, that's obviously the stricter punishment. Shma Minah, skila chamura. So you see from this that skila is stricter. And the Gemara continues, Sreifa chamura misayif, the punishment of Sreifa, burning, is stricter than Sayif, than beheading. Shekei nitna lebas kohen shazinsa, because again, that is the punishment that's given to a bas kohen who commits adultery. She's given that stricter punishment. Umay chumran, why is that considered stricter? Shekein mechaleles as Savia, because again, she's profaning the house of her father. But the Gemara continues, Adrabah, you can argue the contrary. Sayif chumran, maybe Sayif should be considered stricter. Shekei nitin la'anshe Ir Hanidachas, that's the punishment for anshe Ir Hanidachas. Umay chumran, why is that so strict? Shekein mamon and avad, because again we find that their property is destroyed. But the Gemara continues and says, Nemar avia beskila, it says the word avia by skila. V'nemar avia besreifa, and it says the word avia by sreifa. Ma avia ha'amar beskila, skila chamura, just like it says avia by skila, we understand that skila is stricter. Skila chamura misayif, that skila again is stricter than sayif. So you can say the same thing, af avia ha'amar besreifa, so too when it says the word avia by sreifa, we make that comparison, sreifa chamura misayif, that sreifa is stricter than sayif. And the Gemara continues, Sreifa chamur michenek, Sreifa is stricter than strangulation. Shekei nitna lebas kohen shazinsa, Shazinsa. Again, that is given to the daughter of a Kohen who commits adultery. My chumran, why is that so strict? Kida Amran, as we said above, again, in such a situation, she's profaning the house of her father. But the Gemara says, Adrab, on the contrary, chenek chomer, we can argue that chenek is stricter, shekein nitan, lamake avivimo. Again, that's the punishment for one who strikes his father or his mother. Umay chomer, why should that be considered strict? Shekein hukash kvodan lechavan amokum, because honoring one's parents is compared to honoring HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Gemara says, Mida'afki rachmana l'nesua bas kohen mechlal nesua bas Yisrael. Again, from the fact that the Torah says a nesua, who's the daughter of a Kohen by adultery, she is different than a nesua bas Yisrael, and it goes mechenek l'sreifa. Instead of getting strangulation, she gets sreifa, she is burned. Shma mina sreifa chamura. So again, you see that sreifa is more chamur. And the Gemara continues, Sayif chamur michenek, beheading is more strict than strangulation. Shekein nitin la'ansha yarnidachas, because that's the punishment for the people of an yarnidachas. Umay chumra, shekein mamonim avad. And how do we know that that's so strict? Because their property is destroyed. The Gemara says, Adrab, on the contrary, chenek chomer, maybe we should say strangulation is stricter. Shekein nitin l'makei aviv imo, that's the punishment for one who strikes his father or his mother. My chumra shekein hukash v'chulu. And why is that so strict? Again, because that's compared to honoring HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the Gemara says, afilu hachi, nevertheless, poshed yadu be'ikar adif, in the situation of the people of an Nidachas, that has to do with Avodah Zarah, they are denying the fundamentals of the Torah, so therefore that is stronger. That's how we know that Sayif is stricter than Chenek. And the Gemara continues with the two dots. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, and he changes the order of the strictness, and the Gemara discusses this, Sreifa chamor miskila. According to Rabbi Shimon, Sreifa is stricter than skila, shekein nitna lebas kohen shazinsa, because that's the punishment for the bas kohen who commits adultery. Umay chumra, and again, what's the strictness? Shekein mechalelas asavia, because she's profaning her father. But the Gemara says, Adrab, on the contrary, skila chamura, we should say that skila is stricter, shekein nitna lemegadef ulo oved, avodas kochavim, because again, skila is the punishment for one who blasphemes, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and one who worships Avodah Zarah. Umay chumran, why is that so strict? Shekein poshed yadu bikar, because he's denying a fundamental of the Torah. And the Gemara says to that, Rabbi Shimon l'taimei, Rabbi Shimon actually is following his reason, the Amar, because Rabbi Shimon happens to say, achas arusa v'achas nesua, that it's true by both an arusa and nesua. When we say that a bas kohen shazinsa, that she gets sreifa, that's true whether we're talking about an arusa or nesua, meaning according to Rabbi Shimon, a bas kohen who's an arusa shazinsa, she's going to get sreifa, she is not going to get skila. So yatzel sreifa, so that goes, that she gets sreifa. Umida'afge rachmana la arusa bas kohen mechlal arusa bas Yisrael. Now, from the fact that the Torah treats an arusa bas kohen stricter, presumably, than an arusa bas Yisrael, and an arusa bas Yisrael gets skila, and it goes miskila l'sreifa, goes from skila to sreifa. The arusa bas kohen, she gets sreifa and not skila. Shma mina sreifa chamura. So you see from that sreifa is stricter than skila. And the Gemara continues, according to Rabbi Shimon, sreifa chamura michenek, sreifa is stricter than chenek. Shekein in the lebas kohen shazinsa, because that's the punishment for a bas kohen who commits adultery. Umay chumra kedarman, and why is that so strict? That's like we said above. The Gemara says, Adrab, on the contrary, chenek chomer shekein nitan l'makei aviv imo. Chenek should be considered stricter because it's the punishment for one who strikes his father and mother. Umay chomer shekein ukash kavodim l'chavan amokim. Why is it so strict? As we said above, because honoring them is compared to honoring HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the Gemara says, midafke rachmanan l'nesua bas kohen mechlal nesua bas Yisrael. From the fact that the Torah says we treat a nesua bas kohen, a married bas kohen, stricter than a nesua bas Yisrael, and we go mechenek l'sreifa instead of getting chenek, which is by nesua bas Yisrael, the nesua bas kohen gets sreifa. Shma amina sreifa chamur. So you see that sreifa is stricter. Sreifa chamur misayif. Sreifa is stricter than sayif. Shekein nitna lebas kohen shazinsa. Again, that's the punishment for a bas kohen shazinsa. Ma'ay chumra, and why is that stricter? Kedaman, like we said above. Adrab, on the contrary, sayif chamur. One can argue sayif is more strict. Shekein nitin la'ansha yarnidachas. That's the punishment for the people of the yarnidachas. Umay chumra shekein memonim avad. Why is that so strict? Because their money is destroyed. Amrit. So on that we'll say v'chiyeza koach meruba. What really is stronger? Koach hamediach or koach hanidach, is the one who causes others to worship Avodah Zarah, or the people who are convinced to worship Avodah Zarah. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Amid Beis.